The ground shook as Dexter Hindy's boots struck the landing pad of the Maris Research Facility. Above him, the twin moons of the planet cast an eerie purple glow over the desolate landscape, illuminating the facility's titanium walls that reached toward the alien sky. "Agent Haynes," a nervous voice called out. "I'm Dr. Reeves. We weren't expecting you for another cycle." Dex adjusted his enhanced vision to the darkness. The scientist before him was sweating despite the cold, his lab coat wrinkled and stained with what appeared to be coffee or perhaps something worse. "The Bone Crusher doesn't wait," Dex replied, his voice a deep rumble that made the scientist flinch. He had earned that nickname by dismantling enhanced soldiers with ease, and he wore it like armor. The entrance doors of the facility hissed open, revealing a corridor lined with enough firepower to level a small city. Dex took note of each weapon's placement and the guards' positions, calculating kill zones and escape routes. Out of habit, his augmented muscles coiled beneath his tactical suit, ready for action even after the 30-hour journey from Earth Command. "The subject." Dr. Reeves stumbled over his words as they walked. "She's been particularly aggressive since the last incident. 3 of our best interrogators are dead, Harry." "I read the report," Dex interrupted. "Show me the footage in the monitoring room." Holographic screens flickered to life, revealing a massive chamber and within it something that made even Dex's enhanced heart skip a beat. The alien queen, Zania, stood at least 9 feet tall, her blue skin shimmering with what looked like living armor. But it wasn't her size that drew his attention. It was her eyes, burning with an intelligence that seemed to pierce through the recording itself. "Fascinating," Dex murmured, stepping closer to the screen. The footage showed an interrogator approaching her with a neural probe. In less than a second, the queen's armor transformed into razor-sharp spikes, impaling the man before he could even scream. "That's why we've implemented new safety protocols," Dr. Reeves said, wringing his hands. "The containment chamber is now equipped with, 'Take me to her.'" Dex's command sliced through the air. "But the briefing, the protocols." Dex turned, fixing the scientist with a stare that had made hardened criminals confess their sins. The walk to the containment chamber was silent, except for Dr. Reeves's anxious breathing. Guards snapped to attention as Dex passed, their eyes wide with recognition. The Bone Crusher's reputation preceded him, the man who had single-handedly quelled the Piraeus uprising, who had survived things that would have killed a dozen ordinary men. The chamber doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a space larger than a shuttle bay. In the center, surrounded by energy fields and restraints that could hold back a small sun, stood Zadokania. She was even more impressive in person. Her blue skin had a metallic sheen, and her armor shifted like liquid mercury. Despite her chains, she maintained a regal posture, her features striking a perfect balance between alien and humanoid. "Agent Haynes," Dr. Reeves squeaked. "The protective suit is mandatory for—" Dex was already removing his tactical gear. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the containment fields. Guards raised their weapons, and scientists gasped as he stripped down to his base layer. Zania's eyes locked onto him, her armor rippling with deadly spikes. But Dex noticed something else, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even curiosity. "Leave us." "Leave us." "Liquine." "But sir, the pro." "But sir, the pros. Protocols. I said leave." His tone left no room for argument. The chamber emptied quickly, leaving Dex alone with the most dangerous prisoner in human space. He approached slowly, deliberately studying her reactions. The armor covering her body shifted like waves on a dark ocean, forming and reforming patterns that seemed to respond to his proximity. "Come to die like the others?" Her voice was unexpectedly melodious, with an accent he couldn't place. "Your species has such an appetite for death." Dex sense stopped just outside the inner containment field. "Is that what you think we are? Death Seekers?" She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a storm. "You're worse. You're conquerors who pretend to be peacekeepers. At least Death Seekers are honest about their intentions." Says the woman who killed 3 men with a touch. Dex moved closer, his enhanced senses registering the subtle changes in her armor's pattern, which was becoming more aggressive, spikes forming and retracting in rhythmic waves. "They tried to invade my mind," Her massive form straightened, chains clinking. "Would you not defend yourself against such invasion?" Dex's lip quirked. "Fair point." He stepped right up to the containment field, close enough to feel its energy raising the hair on his arms. "But I'm not here to invade your mind." "No." Her eyes, iridescent and alien, narrowed. "Then why are you here, Bone Crusher?" Quote. The use of his nickname made him pause. "You know who I am? I know what you are." She moved forward, chains stretching to their limit. "A weapon like me. The difference is, I was born this way. You chose to become a monster. Is that what you see when you look at me?" Dex's hand hovered near the field controls. "A monster? I see a man who has killed so many times that death clings to him like a second skin." Her armor rippled again, but this time the spikes seemed less pronounced. "But unlike the others, you're not afraid." Quote. Fear is a luxury I can't afford." With deliberate slowness, Dex reached for the field controls. "Stop!" Dr. Reeves' voice crackled over the intercom. "Agent Haynes, you cannot deactivate the containment field. It's against all protocols." Quote. Dex tapped the controls, and the energy field between them disappeared with a soft whine. Xenia's eyes widened, her armor shifting rapidly. "Either very brave or very foolish." Quote. "I've been called worse." Dex stepped forward, now completely within her reach. "You could kill me right now. We both know those chains wouldn't stop you." The Queen's armor writhed, spikes forming and dissolving. "Perhaps I will, but you won't." Quote. Dex moved closer still, close enough to see the subtle patterns in her blue skin. "Because you're curious, just like I am." Quote. Perious. Her massive form towered over him, but Dex didn't flinch. He could hear chaos erupting in the control room, could imagine weapons being trained on them both. But his focus remained on Zacania, watching as her armor began to change in a way he hadn't seen before. "You're different," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "Your heartbeat, it's steady even now." Quote. Genetic enhancement. Dex shrugged, though he suspected she already knew that. "The others?" Zadihania's armor continued its strange transformation, becoming less weapon-like and more fluid. "Their fear made my armor react. Their hatred made it weapon-sharp. But you..." Dex did something then that made every guard in the facility collectively hold their breath. He reached out and touched her arm. The effect was immediate and stunning. Where his hand made contact, her armor seemed to melt away, revealing smooth blue skin underneath. The transformation spread like ripples in a pond, changing the texture of her entire arm. "Fascinating," Dex murmured, watching as the armor continued to shift. You respond to emotional stimulus, don't you? Not just physical threats." Quote. Xenia's expression was a mixture of shock and something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "How did you know?" "I didn't." His hand remained on her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his palm. "But I suspected. Your file mentioned that your armor was strongest when facing aggressive interrogators. It wasn't hard to make the connection, and yet you approached without fear or aggression." Her voice had lost its edge of hostility. "Why?" Coot. Dex met her gaze steadily. "Because sometimes the best way to understand a so-called monster is to treat them like they're not one at all." The chamber fell silent as they studied each other. Despite the alarms blaring in the control room, despite the weapons trained on them both, time seemed to slow in that moment of first contact. "Your handlers are quite distressed," Xenia observed, a hint of amusement in her voice. Her eyes flicked to the observation window where scientists and security personnel were frantically moving about. "They'll survive." Dex maintained his touch, fascinated by how her armor continued to transform. "Though I suspect I'll be filling out paperwork for weeks." Quote. A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh. "The mighty Bone Crusher defeated by bureaucracy." "Bureaucrats are scarier than any alien queen." His lips twitched. "No offense." Quote. "Oh, and here I thought I was the most dangerous prisoner in the galaxy." Her armor rippled again, but this time it seemed almost playful, like waves catching moonlight. Dex moved his hand, watching as the armor reformed slowly behind his touch. "About that, I've been wondering if you're so dangerous, why stay? These chains couldn't hold you, not really. Quote, dot. Xenia's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Perhaps I'm waiting for something. Or someone. Before she could answer, the chamber doors burst open, and a squad of heavily armed guards poured in, led by a red-faced security chief. "Agent Haynes!" the chief barked. "Step away from the prisoner immediately!" Quote. Dex didn't move. Instead, he kept his eyes on Xenia, watching as her armor began to respond to the new tension in the room. Spikes started forming again, but they were different now. Defensive rather than aggressive. "Stand down!" Dex commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had ended wars. "The situation is under control." Under control? Dr. Reeves had appeared behind the guards, his face pale. "You violated every safety protocol we have! She's killed 3 interrogators!" "Yes, you mentioned that." Dex finally turned to face them, positioning himself slightly between the guards and Xenia. "Did anyone bother to ask why?" Quote. The silence that followed was telling. "They tried to force their way into my mind," Xenia said quietly. "My armor responds to threats. It's instinctive." Quote, dot. "And now," Dex gestured to her transformed state, "what's this response to?" Quote. She looked down at her own body, seeming almost surprised by its current appearance. Where there had been sharp edges and weapon-like protrusions, now there were smooth curves and flowing lines. Her massive form still commanded attention, but it no longer screamed of danger. "This is unexpected," she admitted. "Lower your weapons," Dex ordered the guards. "You're only making things worse." "Agent Haynes," the security chief started. "With all due respect, that wasn't a suggestion." Dex's enhanced eyes gleamed in the chamber's harsh light. "Unless you want to explain to Earth Command why you interfered with a top-level investigation." The guards hesitated, then slowly lowered their weapons. The change in Xenia's armor was immediate. The defensive spikes receded even further. "Interesting," Dex murmured. He turned back to Xenia. "Your armor doesn't just react to emotions. It amplifies them. The fear in this room was making you more fearsome. The aggression was making you more aggressive." Quote, dot. "And what am I reflecting now, Bone Crusher?" Her voice had taken on a curious tone, almost teasing. Dex studied her transformed state. The flowing lines, the subtle iridescence of her blue skin, the way her massive form seemed less threatening and more magnificent. "Curiosity," I said finally. "Maybe even a little trust." Quote, dot. The security chief cleared his throat. "Agent Hindies, we still need to follow protocol. The director will want a full report." "Then let me give you something worth reporting." Dex's voice carried through the chamber. Without warning, he reached up and touched Xenia's face. The reaction rippled through her entire body. The remaining armor melted away like frost in sunlight, revealing smooth blue skin underneath. Her features, once partially obscured by defensive plating, emerged in striking detail. High cheekbones, full lips, and those extraordinary iridescent eyes. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Even the guards stepped back. "Impossible!" Dr. Reeves whispered. "The armor, it's completely receded." Xenia's eyes were wide with surprise, fixed on Dex. "No one has touched me like this since before the invasion." "That's comrade." Dex kept his hand on her cheek, his thumb tracing a line along her jawline. "How does it feel?" "Like remembering who I was," she whispered, "before they made me their weapon." Away. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had expected. Then Xenia did something that shocked everyone. She smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her seem less alien, more real. "Well, Bone Crusher," she said softly, "it seems you've succeeded where all others failed. You've seen beneath my armor." "Just the surface," Dex replied finally, lowering his hand. "I suspect there's much more to discover." Quote, dot. "Is that a threat or a promise?" Quote, "That depends on you." He turned to address the stunned audience. "I'll need daily access to the prisoner. No restrictions, no interruptions, and get rid of these chains. They're clearly unnecessary." "But sir," the security chief started, "do I need to remind you who I am?" Dex's voice carried that edge again, the one that had earned him his nickname. "No, sir. We'll make the arrangements." As the chamber slowly emptied, Dex turned back to Zemania. Her armor remained withdrawn, but there was a new tension in her posture. "You're taking a risk," she said quietly. "Your superiors won't like this." Quote, dot. "My superiors sent me here to understand you." He met her gaze steadily. "I intend to do exactly that." "And if you don't like what you find beneath the surface?" Dex's lips curved in a slight smile. "That's the thing about being the Bone Crusher. I don't scare easily." As he turned to leave, Zania called after him, "Tomorrow." He paused at the door, looking back at her transformed state. Powerful yet vulnerable, alien yet somehow familiar. "Tomorrow? We have much to discuss, Your Majesty." The chamber doors closed behind him, leaving Zapenia alone with her thoughts and her changed armor. For the first time since her capture, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope! The observation room's lights flickered as Dex reviewed the footage for the 100th time. Bone. On the screen, Zadisenia's armor shifted and flowed like liquid metal, responding to his touch in ways that defied conventional physics. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Dr. Reeves appeared behind him, his reflection ghostly in the darkened screen. "We've never seen her armor behave like this before." "Because you've been studying her wrong." Dex's voice carried an edge of irritation. "You treated her like a lab specimen instead of a sentient being." "She's not human." Quote, "Agent Haynes, neither am I technically." Dex turned his enhanced eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. 23% of my body is synthetic. Does that make me a specimen too?" Before Reeves could respond, alarms blared through the facility. Dex was moving before the first echo died, his augmented muscles carrying him to the containment chamber in seconds. Inside, he found Zania surrounded by medical drones, her armor bristling with defensive spikes. A team of scientists huddled behind protective barriers, monitoring readings on their tablets. "Stand down!" Dex commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Agent Haynes, we're in the middle of a crucial test," one scientist began. "I said stand down." He strode forward, ignoring the warnings of the security system. The drones retreated at his approach, their programming recognizing his authority. Zatinia's armor began to smooth as he neared, the deadly spikes melting away. "Your timing is impeccable, Bone Crusher." "I aim to please." He deactivated the remaining security measures with a few quick commands. "Care to tell me what this crucial test was about?" Her massive form straightened, chains jingling. "They wish to see how my armor responds to various stimuli, electrical, chemical, neural torture." "You mean science," she corrected, though her tone suggested she shared his assessment. "Though I must admit their methods lack finesse." Dex turned to the scientists. "Out all of you! The prisoner is now under my exclusive jurisdiction, but the director can take it up with Earth Command." His enhanced eyes flashed dangerously. "Would you like me to make that call?" The chamber emptied quickly, leaving them alone. Dex studied Zacania's form, noting the subtle tremors in her armor, the way it seemed to pulse with residual pain. "Why do you endure this?" he asked quietly. "Would you believe me if I said I was waiting for someone like you?" Her smile held a hint of irony. "Someone who could see past the monster they made me into." Quote, dot. Dex moved closer, watching as her armor continued to calm under his presence. "Tell me about your people, the real story, not the propaganda Earth Command feeds us." Quote, dot. Zania's massive form settled, her blue skin catching the harsh chamber lights. "We were builders, creators. Our armor wasn't meant for war. It was for protecting us while we shaped worlds." Quote, dot. "Terraformers, something like that." She reached out with one hand as far as the chains would allow. Her armor rippled, forming intricate patterns that looked almost like circuit boards. "We could connect with planetary cores, redirect energy flows, create life where none existed." Quote, dot. Until humans arrived, she agreed, her voice hardening. "Your kind saw weapons where we saw tools, saw threats where we offered alliance." Quote, Dex watched as her armor shifted again, this time forming shapes that resembled flowering vines. "Show me!" Without hesitation, he stepped within her reach. Zalminga's eyes widened. But she slowly brought her hand to his temple. The moment they connected, Images flooded his enhanced mind. He saw vast cities that grew from living metal, structures that breathed and moved with their inhabitants. He witnessed her people dancing with planetary energies, their armor glowing with creative power, and he felt their terror when human warships darkened their skies. Enough, he gasped, stepping back. His cybernetic implants struggled to process the alien memories. Now you understand? Xenia's voice was soft, almost gentle. What you call armor is our connection to life itself. We transform because all life transforms. We adapt because that's what life does. Catrant. Dex's enhanced mind raced with implications. But your defensive capabilities came after? When we learned we needed them. Her massive form seemed to shrink slightly, armor dulling with remembered pain. I led my people in peace. I never wanted to learn how to kill. Before Dex could respond, the chamber door hissed open, and Director Calder strode in, flanked by armed guards. Agent Haynes, Calder's voice dripped with false courtesy. I see you're making progress with the subject. More than your torture sessions ever did, Harry. Dex positioned himself subtly between Xenia and the newcomers. Torture? My dear boy, we're conducting vital research. Calder's smile didn't reach his eyes. In fact, we've made a breakthrough. The subject's DNA contains sequences we can isolate and replicate. Imagine armor that responds to emotional states, that can be programmed for maximum lethality. Quote. Dex felt Xenia's armor shift behind him, responding to the threat. You're talking about weapons development. I'm talking about evolution, progress. Calder stepped closer, lowering his voice. Think about it, Haynes. Your enhancements were just the beginning. With her DNA, we could create soldiers who truly are invincible. Quote. By corrupting everything her people stood for. Quote. By surviving. Calder's facade cracked slightly. You've seen the reports from the outer colonies, the threats we face. We need every advantage. Get out! Dex's voice could have frozen plasma. Excuse me? I said get out or I'll show you exactly why they call me the Bone Crusher. The tension in the chamber crackled like static electricity. Calder's guards shifted nervously, their weapons half raised as they watched Dex's enhanced muscles coil beneath his tactical suit. You're making a mistake, Haynes. Calder's smile had vanished completely. Earth Command won't look kindly on this emotional attachment to the subject. Emotional? That smile. Dex's laugh was cold enough to make even Xenia's armor ripple. I'm simply protecting Earth's interests, Aramitz. After all, how can we study her abilities if you destroy them with your crude experiments? Behind him, he sensed Zapania watching the exchange with keen interest, her massive form casting shadows that danced across the chamber walls as her armor shifted in response to the confrontation. Very well. Calder straightened his lab coat. We'll do this officially. Expect a full review of your authority here, Agent Haynes. As they left, Dex's enhanced hearing picked up Calder's whispered orders to his staff. Prepare the extraction team. If Haynes won't cooperate, we'll proceed without him. The chamber doors sealed shut, leaving them alone again. Dex's cybernetic implants were already calculating scenarios, escape routes, contingencies. They fear you, Xenia observed, her voice carrying a note of admiration. The mighty Bone Crusher, defender of aliens. They should fear me. Dex turned to face her, his enhanced eyes glowing with intensity. I've toppled governments for less than what they're planning. And what exactly are they planning? Her armor had taken on a curious pattern, something between defensive spikes and flowing curves. Instead of answering, Dex moved to the control panel, his fingers flying over the interface, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. The chains holding Xenia suddenly released, clattering to the floor. What are you doing? She stretched her massive form, armor flowing freely for the first time since her capture. Testing a theory! He approached her, utterly fearless, despite her now unrestrained state. Show me what happens when you're not fighting against restraints. Show me what your armor does when you're truly free. Zaphania's eyes widened, then narrowed with understanding. Set. Slowly, her armor began to transform. Gone were the defensive spikes and weapon-like protrusions. Instead, her blue skin seemed to glow from within, patterns of light dancing across her surface like the aurora borealis. Beautiful, Dex breathed, watching the display. This is what you were meant to be, isn't it? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. But they'll never see it this way. To them, I'll always be a weapon to be harvested. Dex's enhanced hearing picked up movement in the corridors. Teams assembling. Weapons being prepped. Calder wasn't waiting for official approval. They're coming, he said quietly. And this time they're not planning to ask nicely. Xenia's armor rippled with understanding. What will you do, Bone Crusher? Garrett. Your duty is to Earth Command. My duty. Dex moved to the security console, his fingers dancing across the controls. Is to protect humanity. Sometimes that means protecting humanity from itself. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the chamber in crimson, casting eerie shadows across Xenia's transformed state. Warning! Containment breach detected. Emergency protocols initiated. The AI's voice echoed through the complex. What have you done? Xenia watched as Dex systematically disabled security measures, creating a diversion. They're about to learn why crossing the Bone Crusher is considered suicide in most systems. The chamber doors burst open. A fully armed extraction team poured in, led by Calder himself. They froze at the sight of Xenia unchained, her massive form towering beside Dex. Agent Haynes! Calder's voice cracked with rage. Step away from the subject and surrender yourself for questioning. Dex's response was pure action. His augmented body moved with impossible speed, crossing the space between them before the guards could raise their weapons. The first three went down in a blur of precision strikes, their enhanced armor crumpling under his legendary strength. Xenia watched in awe as the Bone Crusher lived up to his name. He moved like liquid death, each strike calculated for maximum effect. Guards flew across the chamber, weapons clattered uselessly to the floor, and Calder backed away in terror. Stop him! Calder screamed. Use the neural disruptors! One guard managed to fire his disruptor. The beam struck Dex square in the chest and did nothing. He smiled, a cold expression that had made hardened criminals weep. Funny thing about neural disruptors, he said, advancing on Calder. They don't work so well on someone who's already part machine. Then everything happened at once. More guards flooded the chamber. Xenia's armor responded instinctively, forming a protective barrier around them both. And Dex made his decision. He spun toward her, his enhanced eyes meeting her alien gaze. Do you trust me? What? Do you trust me? His voice carried an urgency she'd never heard before. In answer, her armor flowed outward, enveloping him in its protective embrace. The sensation was electric, his enhanced nervous system connecting with her alien biology in ways neither of them had expected. Hold on, he commanded. And then he was moving, carrying them both through the chaos of the chamber. Guards fell before them like leaves in a storm, their weapons useless against the combined might of Earth's deadliest agent and an alien queen's living armor. They burst through the facility's outer walls, alarms screaming in their wake. Xenia's armor protected them from the toxic atmosphere of Maracus, as Dex's augmented legs carried them across the barren landscape. Where are we going? She asked, her voice resonating through their shared connection. To prove that not all humans see you as a weapon. His determination flowed through their link. To show them what your people were really meant to be. Behind them, the facility's defenses came to life, but they were already moving too fast, their combined abilities making them nearly unstoppable as they raced toward freedom under Marcus's purple moons. Both knew there was no turning back. The Bone Crusher had made his choice, and for the first time since her capture, the alien queen felt something more powerful than hope. She felt purpose. The twin moons of Marquinus cast long shadows across the barren landscape as Dex and Zidonia raced through the toxic atmosphere. Her armor encased them both in a protective cocoon, while his enhanced legs carried them at speeds that would have torn apart ordinary humans. They're deploying hunter-killers, Dex announced, his augmented vision detecting the automated pursuit craft launching from the facility. Any suggestions? There's a place! Xenia's voice resonated through their shared connection. An ancient temple of my people, 2 kilometers east, built into the mountain. Dex altered their course without hesitation, his cybernetic systems calculating the most efficient route. Behind them, the hunter-killers screamed through the purple sky, their weapons charging. Quote, They're not trying to capture us anymore, he noted, dodging the first volley of plasma fire. Calder switched to elimination protocols. Can't let his secret weapon escape. There was a bitter humor in Xenia's tone. Her armor shifted, forming aerodynamic patterns that increased their speed. A temple appeared before them, its ancient spires rising from the mountainside like the bones of some prehistoric beast. Crystalline structures caught the moonlight, sending rainbow refractions across the toxic landscape. "Beautiful," Dex breathed, even as his combat systems tracked multiple incoming threats. "It was our last sanctuary." Xenia guided them toward a hidden entrance. "Before your people came." They burst through an energy barrier that Dex's sensors hadn't even detected, emerging into a vast chamber that defied physics. The interior space seemed to stretch for kilometers, yet his enhanced mind told him that was impossible given the mountain's dimensions. "What is this place, Saniti?" Xenia's armor retracted slightly, allowing them to separate while maintaining their protective bubble. Her massive blue form seemed to resonate with the chamber's crystal walls. "This is where we learn to transform," she explained, "where we first understood that life itself is nothing but endless adaptation." An explosion rocked the temple's entrance. Calder's forces had arrived. "We don't have much time," Dex said, his enhanced body already moving into combat stance. "Whatever you're planning." "Look at me, Bone Crusher." Xenia's voice commanded attention. Her armor was changing again, but differently than before. It flowed like liquid starlight, revealing patterns that made his cybernetic eyes strain to process. "What are you? You've seen beneath my armor. Now see what lies beneath that?" Her massive form began to pulse with energy that his sensors couldn't categorize. "My people weren't just builders or warriors. We were catalysts." The temple walls thrummed with ancient power as Zasaphonia's armor continued its transformation. Crystalline structures around them began to resonate in harmony with her changing form. "Catalyst for what?" Dex asked, even as his enhanced senses registered multiple hostile forces converging on their position. "Evolution!" She reached out her massive blue hand, hovering near his face. "We don't just adapt, we help others adapt. Through connection, through union." Another explosion rocked the temple. Dex's tactical systems highlighted structural weaknesses, calculated escape routes. But something in Zirconia's eyes held him in place. "The experiments at the facility," he realized.